Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're going to give it just a couple of minutes and then we will get started. Hi, Rodney. See a couple people more people pop in, so we'll give it just a couple more seconds and get started. Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining the March Community Hour. My name is Jenny and I'm the Membership and Programs Coordinator for Converged User Group. If you're not familiar or new to Converged, we're a community focused on connecting users, prospects, and Dell CI and HCI technologies and solutions. We do this in a variety of different ways, including virtual programs like today, VR programs, and in-person events. We do this to bring people together, to network, and to share best practices and ideas. For today's event, I would like to remind you to use the Q&A function to ask questions to our speakers. And I'd also like you to use the chat box for any further discussion that you would like to have. Lastly, I will include a link to today's survey at the end of the event today. This feedback is very much appreciated, and we'll use this information for future events. With that being said, David, I will pass it over to you.
Thanks, Jenny, and welcome everybody to another Converged User Group Community Hour. We're going to have a fantastic conversation today, but before we dive into that, I want to thank Dell Technologies, VMware, and Intel for helping make this possible. Our sponsors really help us bring great messages and conversations to you all. And thank you all for joining. I have a co-host today who you may have seen before, Matt Wakefield, the Vice President of the Converged User Group. And
hey,
we're honored. Hey, Matt, good to see you. We're also honored to have Joe Daniels, the CIO of the Illinois State Treasurer's Office, ISTO, joining us for a conversation that will include Apex, VxRail, and as always, we'll get into the people and the processes of IT transformation. Joe, welcome.
Thanks for having me, David, Matt, appreciate it. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, it's going to be fantastic. And we've got great ways to get the audience involved. So folks, if you do have questions, please reach out through chat or the Q&A, and we'll work your questions in as we can. Joe, you know, it was great meeting you last week at Dell Match Play. What a great opportunity it was to be able to hang out and talk. You're doing some fantastic stuff at ISTO. And I'd really love to just get that out to the members and share a lot of the things that we talked about last week, as well as what we were talking about earlier. But to start, can you tell us what is ISTO and how critical technology is for Illinois State Treasurer's Office?
Sure. Appreciate the opportunity to highlight a little bit about what we do. So the State Treasurer's Office is ran by Michael Frericks. Treasurer Frericks took over the Treasurer's Office in 2015, and he has been reelected several times. And it's awesome to have a boss who supports what you do with tech. I know sometimes a lot of our bosses have a little difficulty with tech, and we know what those phone calls are like at 11 o'clock at night. I'm fortunate that I don't get those. Treasurer's Office is responsible for $53 billion in assets total. All of our programs are meant to give back to the community, whether it be our top 3529 program in the country. We have one of the largest ABLE programs for folks with disabilities in the nation. We lead the Alliance. We're also the leaders for the National Association of State Treasurers. Every dollar we spend in our agency, $40 goes back into the communities where we live. So it's a really important job that the treasurer has. And, he entrusts me and my team to make sure we have the technology to move those programs forward.
That's fantastic. And that return is seems a bit mind-boggling. Just real quickly, since you touched on it, how big is your team and that you're managing there for the infrastructure?
Good question. So total between IT development and operations, right now we have about 32 people.
Okay. And how long have you been there, Joe?
I came to this agency in 2018. So I've been here 5 years. Did a little bit of time in the private sector before this and spent time in the federal space. It's been an amazing journey being here in state government. And it's also nice to live in the capital city, so you can actually see the rewards of your work.
Cool. So 5 years there. When did you start the IT transformation and like, what did you inherit? What did things look like? Take us back to the beginning kind of, and bring us along to where we are today.
Sure. So 2015, when the treasurer first took office, he employed a consultant company to come in and do an evaluation of the agency. One of the top issues they found that is an issue for most state and local governments is legacy technologies. It took 3 years to make a really good strategic plan on where he wanted to go with that. Fast forward 2018, he brings me on board. Happy to do so. It was definitely a challenge. If you can imagine kind of worst case scenario, you come in and you have a 200 employee agency. So we're not a huge agency for staff. We're just responsible for a very large footprint. There was on the tech side, there was a server for every employee, literally over 200 physical servers in a data center. We actually had 3 data centers, one in Chicago, one in Springfield, one in Champaign. So you do the math on that. That is a huge power consumption model. It's just a lot of waste. And no one knew what anything did. The networking was in shambles. There was zero security when we started. And I mean zero security compared to where we are now.
Were you guys handling 50 some odd billion back then with zero security?
No. So the portfolio has grown since the treasurer took office. In 2018, we're right around 32 billion. Still a pretty large, pretty large footprint, right? And when I say zero security, I mean legacy infrastructure is inherently insecure, and I think a lot of us know that. And so they were just not strategically aligned to take care of those type of assets. And knock on wood, fortunately, they were in a good space and did not have a target on their back during that time, at least that had made it through. So we were very fortunate. But if you think of it like a clean slate, where we are now from where we were is a very, very different thing.
Yeah. So how did you get there? Did walk us through like the assessment, and then how'd you figure out where to start and where are you now, and then how did Dell play into that? Sure.
One of the first things that we saw that is a very important part of any transformation is your vendor management and your life cycle. When you have a clean slate and you can go in and assess an environment, and you can see you have a hodgepodge of different vendors who provide a product A, product B, you figure you have 200 physical servers, you have a lot of vendors in there with different applications and processes. I am very much a partner relationship driven individual. That's how I do all my strategic planning. And one of the first things that I wanted to do was look at the current team that we had inside, make sure that we had the right people in place for the positions, make moves if we needed, and then bring on additional support. During that process, though, we had to start doing evaluations for all of our vendors. I have a very strong reputation in the state for removing vendors who are not truly partners. If you do not have our best interest in mind or the taxpayers' interest in mind, then you will not be part of our organization. It was a painstaking process, and we did hurt some feelings along the way, but that is okay because it made us a much better agency. How did I get to Dell? I have past experience with Dell using them in the space in both the federal and the private sector. My experience was always very good. Now I have partnered with other vendors as well, specifically for what I needed to do. Dell was the only partner who came forward to the table and were more interested on where we wanted to go than selling us a product at the table. That is ultimately one of the biggest decisions that helped us go down that road. Dell came in, did an assessment of our environment, knew where I wanted to go, looked at our plan, and helped us build a plan, a roadmap to get us 3-5 years out. I'll talk a little bit about where we are now. So we are 80% cloud, 20% on-prem now. Huge advancement for state government. We also only have 18 virtual servers running in our environment compared to where we were before, all handling the workloads much more efficiently than we were doing it before. We are a multi-cloud tenant. We do have Azure for Gov, and we also have AWS, where our Apex services runs. So really, really excited on where we are now. It was not an easy journey. There was some growing pains during that process. And as you can imagine, replacing something like COBOL infrastructure that runs half of the financial industries in the world, getting that out of your environment was a bit of a challenge. Couldn't have done it without the partnership and the consultants that came in and helped us along the way.
Yeah, it's a tough story there to get through. I'm glad that I really appreciate the way you think about it in that strategic partnership level. In the 5 years, when did you start? We were talking about your infrastructure or your environment. You've got VxRail and you've got Apex for, is it backup service?
Yep. Backup services and ransomware recovery.
How did you get that onto the table and into the plan, and what's driving that, and how's it working for you?
Sure. So, well, I've been using that service for a couple of years now. There were some cataclysmic events that got us there. I think everybody here who was part of this group understands what happened in March of 2020 for most of the world. A lot of our lives were turned upside down. We had already begun our transformation, and I'm really proud of this story. When we decided that the state was going to shut down, within 24 hours of that happening, we were up and running fully remote from a workforce that was 100% on-prem. We were the only agency that was able to do that. We had the equipment in place already because we had already started executing our vision. Some of that is luck. Everybody needs a little bit of luck in their life. We happened to have everything in place in December of 2019. We flipped a switch and we were ready to go. That critical pivot moment for us allowed us to do some more critical thinking. All right, let's look at our processes. Everybody's remote. How can I take these old applications, make sure that we're looking more at SaaS platforms, everything web-based, removing that infrastructure on site? During this process, a sister agency got hit with ransomware. They were down for 9 months. 9 months. So imagine your business down for 9 months, where you have to do paper processes. You don't have a way to do email. Everything you're doing is over cell phone. We could not afford that. If our agency did that, the state would come to a screeching halt because financial transactions wouldn't happen. Understanding that event and understanding that I was not going to be the reason that my boss was in the newspaper, because that could be a career, let's call it a resume generating event. Understanding that we reached out to Dell and said, hey, listen, we do DR, we have incident response, we have these things in place right now. We can do it better. We need to do it better. What's on the roadmap? What's on the horizon? Here is what I want. I want to take DR, take it to the next level. I want to go away from that traditional, I've got a site 50 miles away. It's like, I want it in multiple clouds. I want my RTO to be way different than it is now. Right now, it takes me 2 days to restore. I need these applications up within an hour. How can we get there? And so we came in, did an evaluation with a couple different products. Apex by far had the ease of use and the fastest RTO. We can take that application now and restore it within an hour and be fully operational. And all of my investments and banking applications can run smoothly. That was the make or break. We did a proof of concept with it, and that's ultimately the decision to move forward, because we could restore it so fast on different equipment and eliminate having to reintroduce a threat in case we had one.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. You were also saying, I think when we were talking before, that not only can you do this, but you actually exercise the process. How regularly? Yeah, how regularly do you do that?
Obviously, we're financial, right? So we're audited 9 out of 12 months a year. I say 9, it's really 12 out of 12 months, but they'd like to assume that we get a couple of weeks break from out of our audit cycles. Regulators consistently audit financial transaction. That's part of the deal. Our particular agency on the information system audit and compliance side, since 2018, nobody's perfect, but we've had 0 findings in that regard because our team has really honed in our processes and improvement on the security and incident response side. We test that every quarter. A lot of people do it once a year, but we test every quarter, full disaster recovery, take everything down, restore it back. We will continue to test the product and make sure that it does it's what it's supposed to do. So I am looking forward to, the future of what that's going to be. The cool thing about working with a partner is I'm a security practitioner by trade, and every now and then I like to throw little fun things in there. Like I'll get some custom ransomware and say, hey, I'm going to put this file out here and I want to watch what happens when I put it out to the cloud. And so we'll throw additional scenarios in and see how our partners react. It's kind of exciting. So far, so good. We're doing well.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. You also mentioned you've got VxRail on-prem. And I think earlier you said you're 80% in the cloud, 20% on-prem. How do you, how did the adoption of VxRail go? How old is that in your environment, and how did your team adjust to that? And then I'll add this to that. How do you decide where to place your workloads? And is there anything you could share with lessons learned that you can share with members that might help there?
Sure. So, I mean, if you look at the traditional, server model versus hyper-converged, having everything on one platform and switching over and using, we were a Hyper-V shop before. Why? Hyper-V is very attractive because of its cost. There isn't a cost associated with it other than your Microsoft licensing, right? VMware is, it's got a price tag associated with it. However, the way that it processes your workloads, it's a night and day difference. The time I can give back to my team and the time saved from our banking and investment users was worth the cost. Getting my team on board with hyper-converged was a little bit of a journey. I had used a different product in the past, and hyper-converged has really become more and more of a thing. But I showed them how they could manage a much smaller footprint and do it in a much easier way. We like to use that term single pane of glass. It's not a single pane of glass, but it's as close as we're going to get. Having that, it's easier to train my staff. We have more people that are cross-trained in the environment. It's just a lot easier on them. At the end of the day, if my staff's happy, then I know we're going to be able to use the product more efficiently. How do we make the decision? Depends on the criticality of that application. My development team is putting up a new application probably every 30 to 45 days. That's our typical turnaround because we are very forward thinking. We're looking at new investment strategies, new ways that we can put these things to market internally for our customers, which are other state agencies. We usually base it on the number of people that are going to be accessing that application. Internally, if I have an internal application, for example, file print, I keep that here on-prem. It's easy, it's simple to manage, and I don't need to put it in the cloud. If I know that I have to shut off my internet services for any reason, I can also restore here locally and run efficiently internally and still keep the state up and running. That's kind of how we make that determination, how many people access the apps.
Okay, Just to drill into your developers a little bit, do you find them driving your infrastructure choices, or how do you manage that? Do you just say, look, tell me what you need and I'll make sure you've got it? Or do they have preferences that you have to provide to them?
Good question. So kind of a mixture of everything that you just said. My staff is I am not a micromanager. I want to hire the best people and have team that are excited. They live and breathe this stuff. They go home at night. They're doing more research. I give my team enough flexibility and enough tools to where they can do anything in a test environment and come and say, hey, I'll give you an example. So you got full stack developers, but you have one person that's really, really good in Blazor, and then you have another person that's really good in .NET. You put them together and they come up with a great idea and build something completely different. I highly encourage my team to do that. I want to see those new products. We have some homegrown technologies that are second to none. There's about 38 states that want to purchase our applications because they run so well. Listen, these guys, they're great. We like to have a lot of fun. We always compare our comic book collections or I call them action figures. Other people might call them other things, but I let them line their offices with it. We have a good time. But we do these things and we work together in groups, and we do a lot of meetings where we will work through a whole application development process together as a team. So everybody is on board and has buy-in. Having that buy-in from the whole team has really made a difference, but keeping their energy up is the one thing that I focus on.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Cool. Matt, you've been quiet. I'm hearing a lot of things that you tend to weigh in on.
Sure.
It starts with T and it ends with EAM.
Yeah, no, that's good points. I know in other calls, we've talked a lot about how, oftentimes these kind of journeys, the journeys that you're talking about, aren't really so much about the technology, right? The gear. It's about the process and the people. And so I'm curious, over the course of your transformation, what have been the biggest issues that you've had to work through in terms of process and people?
So let's focus on people first. I am a people first leader. That is my first priority. I am very fortunate, knock on wood, today that through the pandemic, I've had zero turnover in my IT staff. They're all still with me. Everyone that was here in 2018 is still here today. And
That's a fantastic accomplishment. I mean, that's pretty unusual.
I'm grateful. Every day I come to work, I'm grateful for that. Why are they still here? State government does not pay what the private sector does. I'm very aware of that. Yes, we have some other benefits, but there are other things as a leader I have to consider. Quality of life, what opportunities are I giving them? What kind of training can they do? My guys and gals get to work with the best in breed technology. We are known throughout the state now as a leader with tech because of who our partners are. We have other states come through and do tours and like, man, I wish we could have that, or the things you guys are working on. We've never seen that. Got it. I'm going to keep making sure they can do those things. If I have a team member that comes to me and says, I want to learn how to do UIX. I want to make it to where every time we're doing this app, I get a whole user group involved. Okay, perfect. Where do you need to go? How can I send you there? I make sure they have all the training that they need. That has been kind of the big thing that sets us apart as an agency. My leadership believes in training our people and helping them be the best they can be. And they feel valued. They have a seat at the table in all of our decision process. We are definitely a team-based decision model. At the end of the day, sometimes there are things like, okay, I get it. We are going to do X though, and we have to make it to this finish line. There is still that part of the process, but my team is valued, and their input is how we make a lot of our decisions. I think that sets us apart, Matt.
No, that's a great story. When you talk about Apex, and I think a lot of us are interested in this journey to as a service. When you implemented that solution, did you set out to look for something delivered as a service, or did you get there as part of your evaluation? Tell us a little bit about how you ended up in that that data protection as a service?
Sure. Honestly, it didn't start out that way at all. We looked at some of the tools that we had in place. Okay, because backup is backup. You can find a tool. How fast can you get it there? How fast can I restore? You go back in time, we were on microfiche and tape. So just moving to disk was a huge thing for the agency, right? We started just looking at services. Okay, how can I get it off-prem? How can I get it off-prem and get it back on-prem in a fast way that I can restore these applications? That's where it started. But then really finding out that you could manage your product, look at your restores, run it from the cloud if you need to, if you have an emergency. Let's say you have a whole site that goes down and I can still run those applications out of a cloud. We weren't thinking that way at the very beginning of the conversation, but seeing what some of the products could do helped us realign our strategy. And we incorporated that vision and was like, you know what? At the end of the day, if I lost physical access to all my buildings, if I have an internet connection, I can get to these services and I can still run my applications in an emergency. Big decision factor there.
Is that encouraging you to look at, other platforms, moving to a service-based approach for your other infrastructure that you have? I mean, in the data center or out?
It is not just in the IT space, right? So when we look at all of our investment strategies as a whole, when we look at our risk appetite for the whole agency, now all of my peers at the senior level, when we sit down and they're looking at products and services to streamline there, we're looking at SaaS first. Obviously, everything we do is security first mindset, but we're looking at SaaS products as a whole because they deliver a much faster return rate. I can get it up and running better. And it seems to be very beneficial for the way we operate as a business.
A lot of our members, we've talked to folks in lots of different industries, and a lot of our members are still faced with a challenge of organizations that really are capital focused, capital investment focused. Did you run into any issues not in the private sector? Did you run into any issues going from that older model to an expense-based model? And if you did, how did you get through those?
I will give this advice to anybody who has to either report to a board or report to your other C-levels or your chief of staff. You have to remember at the end of the day, it's always going to be a give and take. It does not matter what you're trying to do. When you incorporate a different finance model, specifically in government, there are challenges. The challenge is, well, we've always done it this way. Awesome. You've also always been in the dark ages. So how do you make that bridge? Let's just use MFA for an example, right? When MFA became a thing, it's one of the first things we implemented from a security standpoint. The inconvenience of someone having to either use an authenticator app or a hard token, depending on the application, was the selling point. How do we get it? Awesome. Well, here is the risk if you don't. Here is the risk to reputation. Here's the dollar amount associated with it. Presenting that to your peers was a new way of doing it here. So I was very, very fortunate when they look at the bottom line, like, my 3 seconds of inconvenience is definitely worth not taking on that reputational risk. We do that model every time we want to present something. We also have really enjoyed being a leader in the state. It is a good feather in our cap, so to speak, for all of our programs. So our program directors want to keep that moving. They know they can't do it without technology. Immediate buy-in. Also having your leadership realize, man, these programs are making headlines. We're doing these things. Obviously, for an elected official, that matters because we're giving back to the state. Having your senior level buy-in makes the difference. If you do not have that, you are not going to get it across the finish line.
Joe, if I could jump in, can you talk a little bit about how your VxRail is working with your Apex as a service, and how the teams that, like, does the team see that one way or the other? Were there any lessons learned, or was there a growing pains to get those two to work together?
One of the biggest challenges is getting your infrastructure security, and development team to work together.
Okay.
It is 3 separate unique IT languages, and the 3 typically do not do crosstalk. Now they all work together at a table, and they found that, hey, a lot of what we're doing is very similar. It's just a different vernacular. Getting that mindset, it took some time. It was not overnight, but now it's a well-oiled machine. I think that was part of the communication is key to any of these processes, right? And getting your team to talk to each other. As a leader, your job is to make sure they can sit down and communicate effectively. And I have bought many a meal. We may have shared, a great Jenny every now and then outside of work, just to make sure that we get these things across the finish line. But communication as a team is a big part of that.
Yeah, that I think, and Matt, this comes up in our conversations. There's as you transform, it is that the people and process comes together, and the communication there is the glue. Did that come up as there was a real issue? Like, could you see that challenge coming, or how did you address it? How were you aware of it? And then is there lessons learned or best practices you can share with folks to be on the lookout as you take your journey through this? And then also from someone who was with us last week at Dell Match Play, the Jenny is a drink name that was invented last week at Dell Match Play by a group of folks named after our wonderful co-hostess Jenny Norris, who was here earlier.
So appreciate the question, Jenny. That definitely was a shout out to you. It was definitely a good way to commiserate over some of these things. Pitfalls, things to look out for. You're always, if you have a good pulse on your team, you're going to know where the hesitation is. Part of the hesitation in getting these groups together is fear of the unknown. How is this going to impact our workloads? How is this going to impact what we do day to day? Is this going to be more time, or are we going to have to deal with the user groups more? Sometimes on the development side, working with our stakeholders is a little bit of a challenge because they definitely do not speak the same language. Finance and IT is a very different thing. We knew that ahead of time. So what did we do? We brought in a really good project team, built that up, and made sure we had that bridge in communication between our business users and our IT staff. We now manage every project that comes across for the agency, whether it's IT or not. That's part of the operations group, but we have a very clear understanding of what our requirements are for every project that we do. And we've got a great group of people that literally go around to all of our different divisions and ask them how we can be a better helper to what they do every day. We saw that, we got in front of it, and that's why we're successful with it.
I'm curious, Joe, what are the next big things on your radar? I mean, it sounds like you guys have had some phenomenal successes. What are you looking at in the next 12, 18, 24 months?
Great question. So a couple of things I won't mention because they will be proprietary internal. We have a couple of applications that will revamp the way you're able to do investments. We have a full set of day traders that do investments from 6 o'clock in the morning to the end of the trading time. Some of the applications that we develop are pretty amazing. I've got some pretty smart teams. So you'll see it here in the next few months as we make some announcements. Other things that we are doing. So we have moved away from the typical my VxRail stack. Let's talk about that for a second. So I'm going to move away from that VxRail stack. I've got plans to move into that Apex as a service and have a full stack delivered and move into that life cycle every 3 years. When you look at the overall cost for me of licensing, refreshing, that model makes a lot more sense. It actually saves me a ton of money in the long run, and being able to deploy that and have it up and running within 30 days, where typically it would be 6 months for deployment, is a big strategy shift for us. So I'll let you know how that turns out.
That's great.
I did see a question out there about my most favorite or best comic book. It's Spider-Man First Edition. Naturally, I got it from my father. It is in a case, and I don't let anybody touch it.
Wow. All right. That's, yeah. Keep that off-site in a vault.
I may call Apex, see if they've got a location I can store it.
That's right. That's great.
We
Joe,
also had a question there about any, and do you have any unique workloads or VDI or any GPU workloads that you're running?
I'll tell you from our experience, one of the biggest things with HCI and the way that the VxRail handles SQL, guys, it completely changed the way we're able to do those workloads. Our SQL servers were pegged; they were maxed out every single day. The way that the VxRail was able to handle it, and we made them do a proof of concept before we put it in place, because if you remember, we have all that legacy infrastructure. There's still bits and pieces of it still in the code. Everything was so SQL heavy. We're still in the process of moving some of that to different type of applications. But the way that it handled SQL, 9-day difference. I mean, it took down our runtime. It's a couple of applications that would take 6 to 8 hours to run. They're down to about 20 to 30 minutes. Huge difference just in crunching. It's a good question.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Joe, we've got, you've given us a ton of information. You're doing some really fantastic stuff. Very, very cutting edge and pretty advanced on your IT transformation journey. Thank you for sharing that. Is there stuff, are there more things that we haven't touched on that you'd like to share with members right now as we kind of turn the corner here?
Yeah, so I want to focus on, I'm going to go back to where we started a little bit and talk about the partnership and what that really means to me, and what it has meant to my team's success and my success. Everybody here's been in IT for a long time. You guys know that you can go pick something off the shelf. You can buy any product that will do X, Y, Z. When we make our decisions, I'm not looking to just purchase a product. If I want to do that, I can get online and I can order it myself. And that's fine. There are times where you will still do that. We're all technology people. We're technologists, and we have a pretty good understanding on how these things are going to work based on where we are in our careers. I'm not looking for that. I look for a partner who takes the time to understand what we are doing and where we want to go. I need a partner that has a vision, a strategic vision that not only meets what we're doing on the tech side, but meets all of the other things. I talked about being audit. So it's corporate governance, it's sustainability. All of these things are part of a partnership. So I want to touch on this a little bit because I have to give kudos to Dell for knowing one of our biggest strategic initiatives. My boss is very big on sustainability. He's big on the environment and what we can do to make it better. Part of our process is we engage Dell to do a whole carbon footprint study in our agency. So we went through this whole process. At the end of it, when we switched over and changed our model, I have the numbers here, in CO2 emission reductions, 390 tons per year. For reference, that's enough for each person to take 80 flights around the globe. Guys, that's a huge number for a small agency. We're 200 people, yes, 53 billion in assets. But if you look at the size of our infrastructure and what we were able to save in that one thing, think about all the other big places, all the other state, federal, local, private sector businesses. That was a big point for us because we're making a model to where we can actually give back and do better in that. It's not just in that, it's also in our endpoints. We're looking at a new financing model for our endpoints because our partner has a really good recycling program, right? We don't do recycling very well as a state. We're very hyper aware of that. So work with your partners who can do that better. And so that's a big thing that I want to touch on because your partner is not just the technology at the end of the day. It's them understanding your people, your processes, and understanding that they have to be with you on this journey. If you don't have that with where you're getting your things from, you need to pick somebody else.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. That's really
thank you.
fantastic. Big picture, I always enjoy the conversations that we have because we get that that long-term sustainable partnership. It's not a transaction, it's a partnership. And being able to drive that too and bring that perspective of how you're driving that and leading that partnership by identifying the partners that really work for you and are able to extend themselves to the level that you need them to extend to be able to deliver what you need in that full picture. That's fantastic. And really grateful that, you've identified Dell for that, and you've come to share that with the user group. And it's beyond just VxRail, it's Apex. And I think you touched on a lot of the other full portfolio from Dell. So it's, really neat. Glad you were able to come on and share your story. Will you be at DTW?
I will be at DTW this year. I'm also going to bring my infrastructure director. It's always good to get him in front of some other folks who are doing some cool things and get his brain working. So he will be with me this year, and I look forward to seeing everybody out there.
Well, we look forward to seeing you out there too. There's a lot of great things going on. So folks, if you didn't get a chance to ask a question to Joe or Matt here, please mark your calendars. We've got the user group meeting Tuesday, May 23rd out at DTW. We've got a lot of other exciting stuff happening. It's going to be a great time to learn and get back together. Second time back, last year was the first time back after COVID. This year, we've got that rust chipped off, so it'll be even better to be in person. Joe, thank you very much. Matt, thank you for co-hosting. Everybody on the call, thank you. If you didn't get a chance to ask a question of Joe, please go ahead and hit us at member services at convergedusergroup.com, and we'll route that to Joe. Can't wait to get you back, Joe, to hear the neat things that are coming. Really, really fantastic stuff you're doing out there, and look forward to meeting other people on your team.
Awesome. It was a pleasure.
It was fantastic. Jenny, there you are.
I am. Well, Joe and Matt, again, thank you so much for joining us today. I'd also like to shout out and thank our sponsors, Dell Technologies, VMware, and Intel. As mentioned earlier, I included a link to a survey in the chat box. If you will fill that out that survey, so we can get some great information of what you would like to hear at future community hours. I also included a link to the next community hour, which is April 27th. And then, as David mentioned, we will be back at DTW. The location is going to be in Mandalay Bay, which is where DTW is happening this year. And we have the B side of House of Blues. So we're really excited about that space. It's a very unique and beautiful area. So we would love to have you there. We have some really exciting announcements for the user group. So you do not want to miss that. So with all of that being said, we really hope you enjoyed today's community hour. If you enjoyed this, we would love for you to share future events with colleagues and friends. And with that being said, thank you again for joining today, and we look forward to seeing you at future events. Bye, y'all.
Thanks
everybody.
everybody.